The cargo bay of Horizon's Edge hummed with the usual sounds of a busy trading station. Ships came and went, bringing aliens from every corner of the galaxy. Some were tall, some were short, some had fur, and some had scales. Jiwon walked through the crowd with his toolkit, barely noticing the strange creatures anymore. After 2 years working on the station, he had seen it all. He stopped at Dock 17 to check the cargo manifest on his datapad. Another shipment of water filters needed to go to storage level 3. It was boring work, but it paid well enough. Jiwon wiped the sweat from his forehead and started loading the crates onto his hover cart. That's when he heard the screaming. It wasn't the normal kind of screaming that happened when two merchants argued over prices. This was the sound of pure terror. Jiwon looked up and saw dozens of aliens running in the opposite direction. A Quilvan merchant with 4 arms nearly knocked him over. A small Pixan family scattered, their purple skin turning pale with fear. Then Jiwon saw why. A Kryneth walked through the docking bay. She was 7 feet tall, covered in dark scales that looked like armor. Her claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. Rows of sharp teeth showed when she breathed. But what made everyone run were her eyes. They glowed with a yellow light that said one thing clearly: Predator. 3 small shapes followed behind her. They were cubs, maybe as tall as Jiwon's waist. They had the same scales as their mother, but softer and lighter in color. Their eyes were big and curious as they looked around at everything. One of them tried to chase a small cleaning robot, but the mother made a low growling sound and the cub hurried back. Jiwon knew about the Kryneth. Everyone in the galaxy knew about them. They came from a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. The Kryneth had climbed to the top of the food chain and stayed there. They were warriors, hunters, and survivors. Most species gave them plenty of space and respect. The smart ones gave them even more space. The Kryneth mother walked to the security checkpoint. Captain Hyunwoo stood there trying very hard to look calm. Jiwon had to give the security chief credit. Most people would have run away by now. Purpose of visit? Hyunwoo asked, his voice only shaking a little. Transit to Colony World Vexnar, the Kryneth replied. Her voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. My cubs and I need to wait here for 3 cycles until the next transport arrives. Hyunwoo checked his datapad. His hands were steady, but Jiwon could see the sweat on his neck. You'll need to stay in the visitor quarters on level 7. The cubs must remain supervised at all times. The Kryneth mother's eyes narrowed. My cubs are well behaved. I'm sure they are, Hyunwoo said quickly. It's just standard procedure for all visitors with younglings. The Kryneth stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Acceptable. Jiwon went back to loading his cargo, trying not to stare. The Kryneth and her cubs walked past him toward the elevator. One of the cubs looked at him with bright, curious eyes. Jiwon felt his heart beat faster, but the cub just made a small chirping sound and hurried after its mother. The rest of the day was normal. Jiwon moved cargo, fixed a broken conveyor belt, and helped Daeho repair a leaking coolant pipe. Daeho was the only other human who worked the maintenance shift, and he talked non-stop about the Kryneth. Did you see the size of her claws? Daeho asked while they worked. I heard a Kryneth once killed a Thorian battle mech with just their bare hands. That sounds like a story someone made up, Jiwon said, tightening a bolt. Maybe, but I'm not going to test it. I'm staying far away from level 7 for the next 3 days. Jiwon nodded. That seemed like a smart plan, but not everyone on the station was smart. The next morning, Jiwon was eating breakfast in the common area when the alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed on the walls. The station's announcement system crackled to life. Attention, all personnel. We have a security situation on levels 5 through 7. All non-essential workers should remain in their quarters. This is not a drill. Jiwon looked at Daeho, who had gone pale. What do you think happened? They found out soon enough. The news spread through the station like fire. The Kryneth cubs were missing. Their mother had left them in the visitor quarters while she went to arrange payment for their transport. When she came back an hour later, they were gone. Now Velthar, the Kryneth mother, was tearing through the station looking for them. Security reports said she had already destroyed 3 doors and 2 walls. She was following their scent, hunting like her ancestors had hunted prey on their homeworld. Every species on the station was hiding, terrified of what an enraged Kryneth mother might do. Jiwon and Daeho watched the security feeds from the maintenance office. They could see Velthar moving through corridors, her head low as she sniffed the air. Her claws left scratches on the metal walls. Behind her, Captain Hyunwoo and a security team tried to keep up, but they looked scared to get too close. Where could 3 cubs even go? Taeho wondered aloud. Anywhere, Ji-won said. This station has hundreds of corridors and rooms. Dr. Minji's voice came over the security channel. She was a human xenobiologist who worked in the research wing. Captain Kryneth cubs are naturally curious. They're attracted to warm, dark spaces. Check the lower levels, especially anywhere with heat sources. Understood, Hyunwoo replied. All teams focus search on maintenance levels and engine rooms. Ji-won felt a cold feeling in his stomach. The maintenance levels were where he worked, where he lived. His small quarters were down on level 2, right next to the warm coolant processing units. Should we help search? Daeho asked. Before Ji-won could answer, their supervisor's voice came through their communication devices. All human personnel are ordered to stay in safe areas. The Kryneth is extremely dangerous right now. Do not attempt to approach her or the cubs if you find them. Ji-won and Daeho looked at each other. The message was clear. Stay away and stay safe. But somewhere on the station, 3 small cubs were lost and scared, and their mother was becoming more dangerous with every passing minute. 2 hours had passed since the cubs disappeared. Captain Hyunwoo stood in the security control room watching 6 different screens at once. Each one showed a different part of the station. On screen 3, Velthar moved through the commercial district, her massive form casting shadows on the walls. Shop owners had locked their doors. The normally busy corridors were empty. Any sign of them? Hyunwoo asked his team. Negative, sir, one officer replied. We've searched all of level 6 and most of level 5. No trace, Hyunwoo rubbed his tired eyes. He had dealt with many problems during his 10 years as security chief. He had stopped fights, caught thieves, and even handled a small fire once. But he had never dealt with anything like this. An angry Kryneth mother was not something they taught you about in security training. Dr. Minji entered the control room carrying her data pad. She looked worried. Captain, I need to speak with you. What is it, Doctor? I've been researching Kryneth behavior. When cubs this young wander off, they're usually looking for a place that feels safe, somewhere that reminds them of their den back home. We know that already, Hyunwoo said, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. That's why we're searching the lower levels. Yes, but there's more. Minji pulled up a file on her pad. Kryneth cubs have an instinct to find what they call a warm keeper. On their home world, these are older females who watch over young while the hunters are away. The cubs are drawn to specific biological markers, body heat patterns, certain scents, even heartbeat rhythms. Hyunwoo stared at her. Doctor, there are no other Kryneth on this station. I know, Minji said slowly. But other species might give off similar signals. The cubs could be drawn to someone without even realizing why. Before Hyunwoo could respond, another alarm sounded. One of the security officers called out, Sir, we have a report from the merchant sector. A Quilvan trader named Thexal says he saw 3 small Kryneth cubs near the elevator to the human habitat section. That was about 90 minutes ago. Everyone in the control room went silent. The human habitat section was on level 2. It was small. Only about 20 rooms where the human workers lived. Most species avoided it because humans liked their spaces warmer than other aliens found comfortable. Warm spaces, where young Kryneth cubs would want to hide. Get me a map of level 2 right now, Hyunwoo ordered. And find out which humans are off duty today. The officer's fingers flew across his console. Sir, according to work schedules, only 2 humans should be in their quarters right now. Ji-won from cargo maintenance and Subin from the diplomatic office. Contact them both. Tell them to lock their doors and don't open them for anything. But when security tried to call them, only Subin answered. Ji-won's communication device went straight to an offline message. Hyunwoo felt his stomach drop. Where is Ji-won? He demanded. Another officer checked the work logs. He finished a double shift 3 hours ago, sir. Clocked out and went to his quarters. His device shows he turned it off for sleep cycle. Hyunwoo closed his eyes. Of course. Ji-won had worked 16 hours straight repairing coolant systems. The man was probably dead asleep and wouldn't hear anything short of an explosion. We need to get to level 2 now, Hyunwoo said, but carefully. If the cubs are there and Velthar arrives first, he didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what could happen. An enraged Kryneth mother finding her cubs near a sleeping human. It would be a disaster. On screen 3, Velthar had stopped moving. Her head was raised, sniffing the air. Then she turned sharply and ran toward the nearest elevator. She had found the scent trail. "She's heading to level 2, an officer said quietly. Hyunwoo grabbed his communication device and opened a channel to Velthar. He had been avoiding direct contact, worried it might make things worse. But now he had no choice. "Velthar, this is Captain Hyunwoo. We believe we've located your cubs. Please let my security team retrieve them safely." The Krynith's voice came back, filled with barely controlled rage. "No, I will get my cubs. Stay out of my way. Ma'am, please. There's a human in the area where we think your cubs are. He's asleep. He doesn't know they're there. If you burst in, then he should have kept his door locked." The communication cut off. Hyunwoo started running toward the elevator, his security team following. They had to get there first. They had to prevent whatever was about to happen. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Daeho was ignoring orders. His supervisor had told all humans to stay in safe areas, but Daeho couldn't just sit there. Jiwon was his friend, his best friend on this station. If those cubs were anywhere near Jiwon's quarters, he needed to warn him. Daeho took the maintenance tunnels, routes that most people didn't know about. He crawled through access tubes and climbed down service ladders. The tunnels were narrow and dark, lit only by small emergency lights. His heart pounded in his chest. What if the cubs were dangerous? Everyone thought Krynith cubs were cute because they were smaller than adults, but they were still predators. They still had claws and teeth. What if they had already hurt Jiwon? No, he couldn't think like that. Jiwon was smart. He would know what to do if he woke up and found cubs in his room. He would stay calm and call for help, unless he hadn't woken up at all. Daeho finally reached the access hatch that led to level 2. He climbed out into the hallway and immediately felt the warmth. Humans kept this section much hotter than the rest of the station. Most aliens complained about it, but humans liked it comfortable. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Daeho walked slowly toward Jiwon's door, which was just around the corner. He passed Subin's quarters and saw that her door was locked tight, just like security had ordered. But when Daeho turned the corner, he saw that Jiwon's door was slightly open. Not broken or damaged, just open, like someone had forgotten to close it all the way or like something small had pushed through. Daeho's hands were shaking as he approached the door. He could hear sounds coming from inside. Soft sounds, like breathing but not quite human breathing. He pushed the door open a little more and peeked inside. What he saw made him freeze completely. Jiwon was lying on his bunk, still in his work clothes. He was sound asleep, exhausted from his long shift. His mouth was slightly open and he was snoring quietly. On his chest, curled up like house cats, were 3 Krynith cubs. Their scales rose and fell with their breathing. Their claws were retracted, hidden safely away. Their eyes were closed and their faces looked peaceful. One of them had its small head resting right over Jiwon's heart, and they were purring. Daeho had never heard a Krynith purr before. He didn't even know they could. But the sound was unmistakable. It was a deep, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate through the whole room. The cubs were completely content, sleeping peacefully on the human who had no idea they were there. Daeho stood frozen in the doorway, afraid to move or breathe too loud. His brain was trying to process what his eyes were seeing. 3 apex predator cubs, offspring of the most dangerous species in the galaxy, were sleeping peacefully on his friend like puppies. The smallest cub shifted slightly and made a soft chirping sound in its sleep. Its tiny claws flexed but didn't extend. Jiwon mumbled something in his sleep and his arm moved, draping across the cub's back. The cub snuggled closer and the purring got a little louder. This was impossible. This shouldn't be happening. Krynith cubs didn't cuddle with strange aliens. They were supposed to be dangerous even at this age. Their instinct should be to bite anything unfamiliar. But here they were, completely relaxed and content. Daeho slowly backed out of the room, moving as carefully as he had ever moved in his life. One wrong sound could wake the cubs, or worse, wake Jiwon, who would probably panic and scare the cubs. Daeho didn't know much about Krynith behavior, but he knew that scared cubs might attack. He made it into the hallway and quietly closed the door until it was just barely open, the way he had found it. Then he ran. He ran faster than he had ever run before, his feet pounding on the metal floor. He nearly crashed into Captain Hyunwoo and the security team as they rushed toward level 2. "Daeho, what are you doing here?" Hyunwoo demanded. "You were ordered to stay in." "I found them," Daeho gasped, trying to catch his breath. "The cubs. They're in Jiwon's quarters. The security team immediately raised their weapons. Hyunwoo held up his hand to stop them. Is Jiwon hurt? No, he's sleeping. They're all sleeping. What do you mean all? Daeho took a deep breath. The cubs are sleeping on top of Jiwon, on his chest. They're purring. Nobody said anything for several seconds. One security officer lowered his weapon with a confused look. Another officer made a sound like he wanted to laugh but didn't dare. Captain Hyunwoo opened his mouth, then closed it. Then opened it again. They're purring? Yes, sir. I've never heard a Kryneth purr before, but that's definitely what they were doing. Dr. Minji pushed forward through the security team. She had arrived with the second group. Captain, this actually makes perfect sense. Remember what I said about worm keepers? Kryneth cubs are drawn to specific biological signals. Humans must produce the right combination. But Jiwon is just a cargo worker, one officer said. He's not special or... To the cubs, he is exactly what they were looking for, Minji explained. They found someone who feels safe, someone whose heartbeat and body temperature match what they instinctively need. Hyunwoo was about to respond when his communication device crackled. Captain, this is checkpoint 7. Velthar just entered the elevator to level 2. She'll be there in 30 seconds. Everyone's eyes went wide. 30 seconds. That was barely any time at all. Everyone back, Hyunwoo ordered. Give her space when she arrives. Do not aim weapons at her or the cubs. Do not make any sudden moves. The security team moved to the sides of the corridor, creating a clear path. Daeho pressed himself against the wall, his heart hammering. He could hear the elevator arriving, the doors sliding open. Then Velthar appeared around the corner. She was moving fast, almost running. Her yellow eyes were wild with worry and rage. Her claws were fully extended, scraping the walls as she ran. When she saw the security team, she let out a sound that made everyone's blood run cold. It was part growl, part roar, full of threat. Where are my cubs? Her voice echoed through the corridor. Captain Hyunwoo stepped forward, keeping his hands visible and empty. Ma'am, we've located them. They're safe. They're in that room. He pointed to Jiwon's door. Velthar didn't slow down. She charged toward the door, and Daeho thought for a moment she might break it down. But at the last second, she stopped. Her nose was almost touching the door as she sniffed deeply. Everyone held their breath. Velthar's aggressive posture slowly changed. Her claws retracted slightly. Her breathing slowed. She could smell her cubs on the other side of that door. And whatever else she was smelling told her something important. They were not in danger. She pushed the door open gently, much more carefully than anyone expected. The door swung wide and she stepped into the small room. From the hallway, everyone could see inside. Jiwon was still asleep on the bunk, though he was starting to stir now. The cubs remained on his chest, still purring, though their eyes had opened at the sound of their mother's voice. The smallest cub, the one with its head over Jiwon's heart, made a happy chirping sound and looked at Velthar as if to say, "Look what we found." Velthar stood perfectly still, taking in the scene. Her cubs were completely unharmed. More than that, they were content and peaceful. The human had not hurt them, had not chased them away, had somehow, without even knowing it, given them exactly what they needed. That's when Jiwon's eyes opened. The first thing he saw was a 7-foot Kryneth warrior standing at the foot of his bed. The second thing he noticed was the warm, heavy weight on his chest. He looked down slowly and saw 3 pairs of bright eyes staring back at him. The cubs blinked at him. He blinked back. Jiwon said, his voice rough from sleep. Hello? The middle cub chirped at him. Its small tail wagged slightly like an excited puppy. Jiwon looked back at Velthar. She was watching him with an intensity that made his mouth go dry. Every instinct told him to panic, to push the cubs away and run. But he remembered Dr. Minji's lectures about alien species during the mandatory training. Sudden movements around young predators were a bad idea, so he stayed very, very still. I don't suppose you're here to pick up your kids? Jiwon asked quietly. Velthar's head tilted slightly. Behind her in the hallway, Daeho made a sound like a suppressed laugh or maybe a cry of fear. It was hard to tell. The largest cub stood up on Jiwon's chest and stretched, its back arching like a cat. Then it walked up to his face and sniffed his nose. Its breath was warm and smelled faintly like metal. Jiwon held perfectly still as the cub examined him. After a moment, the cub made a satisfied chirping sound and licked his cheek with a surprisingly rough tongue. Then it climbed over his shoulder and jumped down to the floor, walking toward its mother. The other two cubs followed, though the smallest one looked back at Jiwon with what could only be described as disappointment. It didn't want to leave yet, Kesh Rin Tal. Come, Velthar said in her grinding voice. The cubs obediently walked to her side, though they kept looking back at the human on the bed. Jiwon sat up slowly, his heart still racing. His shirt was covered in scales that the cubs had shed, and there were small tears in the fabric from their claws. But he was completely unhurt. Velthar stared at him for a long moment. Then she did something that no one expected. She placed her right fist over her heart and lowered her head slightly. It was a Kryneth gesture, though most people in the hallway didn't know what it meant. But Dr. Minji did. She whispered to Captain Hyunwoo, "That's a gesture of respect and gratitude. She's thanking him." Velthar turned and walked out of the room, her cubs following close behind. The security team parted to let them pass, everyone trying to look anywhere except directly at the massive predator. As she walked down the hallway toward the elevator, one of the cubs looked back at Jiwon one more time. It made a soft, sad chirping sound. Jiwon, still sitting on his bed in shock, waved at it. After Velthar left with her cubs, Jiwon's quarters became very crowded very quickly. Captain Hyunwoo entered first, followed by Dr. Minji, 3 security officers, and Daeho, who refused to leave his friend's side. Everyone was talking at once, asking questions, checking if Jiwon was hurt. "I'm fine," Jiwon kept saying, though nobody seemed to listen. "Really, I'm okay." Dr. Minji scanned him with her medical device, checking for injuries. "No cuts, no bruises. You're incredibly lucky. Those cubs could have accidentally hurt you." "They seemed pretty peaceful to me," Jiwon said. He looked at his torn shirt. "Well, mostly peaceful. Do you have any idea how they got in here?" Captain Hyunwoo asked. Jiwon shook his head. "My door was closed when I went to sleep. I just finished a double shift and I was exhausted. I didn't hear anything until I woke up and saw..." He paused, saw her standing there. "The cubs must have pushed the door open," one security officer suggested. "The locks on these quarters aren't very strong. We'll need to upgrade them," Hyunwoo said, making a note on his datapad. Daeho sat down next to Jiwon on the bunk. "Man, when I saw you sleeping with those things on your chest, I almost had a heart attack. How do you think I felt when I woke up?" Jiwon replied. He ran his hand through his hair and found more shed scales. "This is so weird." Dr. Minji was tapping on her datapad, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is actually fascinating from a xenobiological perspective. Kryneth cubs have never shown this kind of behavior with other species before. We need to understand why they were drawn to you specifically." "Does it matter?" Jiwon asked. "They're leaving on the next transport anyway." "It matters because this could change everything we know about human-Kryneth relations," Minji explained. "If Kryneth cubs naturally trust humans, that's a significant diplomatic advantage." Before anyone could respond, Captain Hyunwoo's communication device beeped. He listened for a moment, his expression growing serious. "Understood. I'll be right there." He looked at the others. "Velthar is requesting to speak with Jiwon. Privately." The room went silent. Jiwon felt his stomach drop. "She wants to talk to me? Why?" "I don't know," Hyunwoo admitted. But she was very insistent. "She's waiting in conference room 3. "Do I have to go?" Jiwon asked quietly. "No," Hyunwoo said. "You can refuse, but..." He hesitated. "I think it would be a good idea." She seemed calm when she left. "She's not angry. Not angry that we know of," Daeho muttered. Jiwon took a deep breath. Every part of him wanted to say no, to stay in his quarters where it was safe. But another part of him was curious. Why did Velthar want to talk to him? What could she possibly have to say? "Okay," he said finally. "I'll go." "I'm coming with you," Daeho said immediately. "So am I," Dr. Minji added. Captain Hyunwoo nodded. "We'll all escort you, just to be safe." 20 minutes later, Jiwon stood outside conference room 3. Through the window in the door, he could see Velthar sitting at the large table. Her cubs were with her, playing with what looked like small toys. The smallest one, Tal, kept looking toward the door as if it could sense Jiwon outside. "Ready?" Captain Hyunwoo asked. Jiwon nodded, not trusting his voice. The door slid open and Jiwon stepped inside. The others started to follow, but Velthar held up one clawed hand. "Only the human called Jiwon. The others wait outside." Daeho looked ready to argue, but Jiwon shook his head. "It's okay. I'll be fine." The door closed, leaving Jiwon alone with Velthar and her cubs. The room suddenly felt very small. Velthar gestured to a chair across from her. Sit, it wasn't a request. Jiwon sat down quickly. The cubs immediately stopped playing and looked at him with interest. Tal chirped happily and started to move toward him, but Velthar made a soft clicking sound and the cub returned to her side. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Velthar studied Jiwon with those intense yellow eyes. He tried not to fidget under her gaze. Finally, she spoke. You did not harm my cubs? No, Jiwon said. I didn't even know they were there until I woke up. They chose you, Velthar continued. In all the station with all the species and all the places to hide, they chose your room, your presence. Jiwon wasn't sure what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. Do you know what this means in my culture? Velthar asked. Jiwon shook his head. Kranith cubs have strong instincts. Survival instincts. They can sense safety and danger even better than adults. When they choose to rest with someone, to be vulnerable around them, it means they sense no threat, no ill will. She paused. My cubs trusted you completely. Even in their sleep when they are most defenseless, they felt safe with you. I'm glad they were safe, Jiwon said carefully. Velthar leaned forward slightly. I was prepared to kill anyone who had taken my cubs, anyone who had harmed them. Do you understand? When I could not find them, I was ready to tear this station apart piece by piece. Jiwon's throat felt dry. Yes, I understand, but you did nothing. You gave them warmth and safety without even knowing it. This is not something I can ignore. Velthar reached into a pouch at her side and pulled out a small object. It was a carved piece of stone on a leather cord. The stone was black and smooth with a symbol carved into it. She placed it on the table and pushed it toward Jiwon. This is a Kranith friendship marker. It means you are under the protection of my clan. Any Kranith who sees this will know you are trusted. You will have safe passage in any Kranith territory. Jiwon stared at the marker. I don't know what to say. Say you accept it, Velthar replied. To refuse would be an insult. Then I accept it. Thank you. Jiwon picked up the marker carefully. It was heavier than it looked and warm to the touch. Kesh, the largest cub, made a chirping sound and looked up at her mother. Velthar sighed, a sound that came from deep in her chest. My cubs wish to say goodbye properly. Before Jiwon could ask what that meant, all three cubs rushed toward him. Tal reached him first, jumping up and putting tiny paws on his leg. Rin and Kesh followed, rubbing their heads against his hands like cats. Jiwon couldn't help but smile. Up close, with them awake and active, he could see how young they really were. Their scales were softer than their mother's, their claws still small and not fully sharpened. They were just babies, really. Dangerous babies, but babies nonetheless. He carefully petted each of them and they purred in response. That deep, rumbling purr that he had slept through earlier. They will remember you, Velthar said softly. When they are grown, when they are warriors themselves, they will remember the human who kept them safe. After a few more moments, Velthar called her cubs back. They obeyed reluctantly, looking back at Jiwon as they returned to their mother's side. One more thing, Velthar said as Jiwon stood to leave. Your species is new to the galaxy. Many do not respect you yet. Many see you as weak. Her eyes met his. But my cubs saw your true nature. They saw what others cannot. Remember that. Jiwon bowed his head slightly, trying to show respect the way he had seen other species do. I will remember. As he left the conference room, Daeho and the others immediately surrounded him with questions. But Jiwon just held up the friendship marker and they all fell silent. Dr. Minji's eyes were wide. Is that what I think it is? Yes, Jiwon said quietly. I think my life just got really complicated. Outside the conference room, through the window, Velthar watched the humans walk away. Her cubs pressed against her sides, still making soft sounds of contentment. Perhaps these humans were not as weak as the galaxy believed. Perhaps there was strength in softness, in being the kind of creature that even predators could trust. It was something worth remembering. News traveled fast in space. By the next morning, every species on Horizon's Edge had heard about what happened. The story spread through the station like wildfire. A human cargo worker had been found sleeping peacefully with 3 Kranith cubs on his chest. The cubs had been purring. Their mother had given him a friendship marker. It was the kind of story that shouldn't be possible. Jiwon tried to go about his normal routine. He showed up for his shift in the cargo bay, hoping everyone would forget about it. That hope died the moment he walked through the door. Every worker in the bay stopped what they were doing and stared at him. Is it true? asked a Quilvan merchant with 4 arms. Did the cubs really choose you? Can we see the marker? A small Pixan engineer bounced excitedly on her 3 legs. Even the usually grumpy Thorian dock supervisor looked at him with something like respect. You've got guts, human. Sleeping with predator cubs like that. I didn't know they were there, Jiwan said for what felt like the 100th time. I was asleep, but nobody seemed to care about that detail. The story was already becoming a legend. By noon, Jiwan heard someone say he had fought off a pack of wild beasts to protect the cubs. By evening, another version claimed he had tamed the cubs with ancient human magic. Daeho found the whole thing hilarious. You're famous now. The human who cuddles with apex predators. I didn't cuddle with them, Jiwan protested. They cuddled with me. There's a difference. Try telling that to the 3 news stations that want to interview you. Jiwan groaned. You're joking. I'm not. Captain Hyunwoo said there's already been requests from Galactic Media. They want to know about the human who befriended a Krynith. Dr. Minji was having the time of her life. She had been studying the data from the incident, running tests and analyzing biological markers. She cornered Jiwan in the cafeteria during lunch. I figured it out, she said excitedly, sliding into the seat across from him. Why the cubs were drawn to you specifically. Jiwan looked up from his food. And? Humans have a unique combination of traits. Our body temperature runs warmer than most species. We produce certain pheromones when we sleep. Our heartbeat rhythm is similar to what Krynith cubs would hear from a den mother back on their homeworld. Minji pulled up graphs on her datapad. Add in the fact that you had just worked a 16-hour shift, so you were in deep sleep and breathing slowly, and you created the perfect environment for cubs looking for safety. So it was just biology? Jiwan asked. Nothing special about me? That's where you're wrong, Minji said. It could have been any human theoretically. But the cubs still had to feel safe enough to approach. They still had to sense that you weren't a threat. That part? That was all you. Jiwan thought about that while he finished his lunch. He had never considered himself special. He was just a maintenance worker, fixing broken things and moving cargo. But 3 predator cubs had trusted him completely, had felt safe enough with him to sleep. Maybe that did mean something. 2 days later, Jiwan received a message to report to the station's diplomatic wing. He had never been to that section before. It was much nicer than the cargo bay, with clean walls and real plants growing in containers. Ambassador Taeyong was waiting for him. She was an older woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Jiwan had seen her around the station but had never spoken to her. Jiwan, she said warmly. Thank you for coming. Please sit. Jiwan sat in a comfortable chair that was much nicer than anything in his quarters. Am I in trouble? Taeyong laughed. No, quite the opposite. I wanted to talk to you about what happened with the Krynith cubs. Everyone wants to talk about that, Jiwan said tiredly. I'm sure they do, but I'm interested for different reasons. She pulled up a holographic display showing various documents. Human-Krynith relations have always been neutral at best. They respect our technology but see us as physically weak. Not threats, not equals, just there. Okay, Jiwan said, not sure where this was going. What you did, even accidentally, changes that. The Krynith value strength, but they also value trust and honor. Velthar giving you that friendship marker is significant. It means her clan, which is influential in Krynith society, now views humans differently. I just slept, Jiwan said. I didn't do anything. You showed kindness without knowing it. You gave safety without expecting anything in return. To the Krynith, that's a kind of strength they respect. Taeyong leaned forward. Word is spreading beyond this station. Other species are hearing about what happened. It's making them reconsider their views on humanity. Jiwan felt uncomfortable with all this attention. I just want to go back to my normal life. I understand. And you can. But I wanted you to know that what happened matters. You've helped humanity more than you realize. On Jiwan's last day before Velthar and the cubs left the station, he received an unexpected visitor. He was in his quarters trying to sleep before his night shift when his door chimed. He opened it to find Velthar standing in the hallway. Alone this time without her cubs, may I come in? She asked. Jiwan stepped aside quickly. The Krynith had to duck to enter his small quarters. She looked around at the cramped space with interest. This is where my cubs felt safe, she said quietly. It is smaller than I expected. It's enough for me, Jiwan replied. Is there something you need? Velthar turned to face him. I wanted to speak with you before we leave tomorrow, to explain something about Krynith culture that you should know. G1 nodded, listening carefully. The friendship marker I gave you is not just a symbol. It is a bond. If you ever need help, if you ever travel to Krynith space, you can call on my clan. We are honor-bound to answer, she paused. But it also means you are part of our story now. My cubs will tell their own cubs about you someday, about the human who kept them safe when they were lost. I hope they tell it accurately, G1 said with a small smile. I'd hate for it to get as exaggerated as the versions I've been hearing around the station. Belthar's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth. It took G1 a moment to realize she was smiling. Stories always grow in the telling, but the heart of it will remain true. You showed my cubs kindness. That is rare in the galaxy. It shouldn't be rare, G1 said. Kindness should be normal. Perhaps that is why your species will do well in the galaxy, Velthar said thoughtfully. You believe kindness is strength, not weakness. She reached into her pouch and pulled out another small object. It was a data chip. This contains my clan's contact information. If you ever need anything, use it. Jiwan took the chip carefully. Thank you, really, I don't know what to say. Say you will remember my cubs. Say you will think of them sometimes. I will, Jiwan promised. How could I forget? The next morning, Jiwan stood in the docking bay with Daeho and Dr. Minji. They watched as Velthar and her cubs prepared to board their transport. The bay was crowded with onlookers. Everyone wanted to see the Krynith family leave. The cubs spotted Jiwan in the crowd. All three of them started chirping excitedly, pulling at their mother's arms. Velthar looked at Jiwan and nodded once, giving permission. The cubs ran over to him, their small claws clicking on the metal floor. They jumped up, trying to reach him, their tails wagging with joy. Jiwan knelt down so they could reach him better. Tal, the smallest, climbed right into his lap. Rin and Kesh pressed against his sides, purring loudly. For a moment, Jiwan forgot about all the people watching. He just focused on the three small creatures who trusted him so completely. Be good, he told them softly. Listen to your mother. Grow up strong. They chirped in response, and he liked to think they understood. Velthar approached and gently called her cubs back. They obeyed, but slowly, reluctantly. Tal looked back at Jiwan one last time and made a sad sound. Safe travels, Jiwan said to Velthar. She placed her fist over her heart in that gesture of respect. May your path be clear, Jiwan of Earth. My cubs and I will not forget you. Then they were gone, boarding the transport. Jiwan watched through the viewport as the ship powered up and pulled away from the station. He could see small faces pressed against a window looking back. He waved until the ship disappeared into the black of space. That was something special, Daeho said quietly. You know that, right? Yeah, Jiwan replied. I know. Back in his quarters that night, Jiwan looked at the friendship marker hanging on his wall. Next to it, he had pinned up the 3 scales that the cubs had shed on his bed. They caught the light, shimmering with colors. He thought about Ambassador Taeyong's words, about how his accidental act of kindness had changed something in the galaxy's view of humanity. It seemed like a lot of weight to put on one person's shoulders, but maybe that was okay. Maybe change started with small moments, with 3 lost cubs finding warmth and safety in unexpected places, with one tired human showing kindness without even knowing it. Jiwan smiled and turned off the lights. Tomorrow he would be back to his normal routine, moving cargo and fixing broken systems. But now somewhere in the galaxy, 3 Krynith cubs would remember him, would remember that a human had kept them safe, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to change a few minds about what humanity could be. The galaxy was full of warriors and conquerors, of traders and explorers. But perhaps it needed more of what humans did best, seeing someone in need and helping not because it was profitable or strategic,